Part 75. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 745. On the sea not far from the sea area, a cargo ship was slowly moving towards the depths of the ocean. The sound of the whistle was mixed with the sound of seagulls. The crew members were wearing blue and white clothes and walking on the deck. Come and go. There are a little more goods this time. The price has actually doubled. Is it true that the peak season has come early? Beside the ship, several businessmen who were transporting goods this time stood together. They were all old customers of a shipping group who often shipped ships, but this time it seemed different from usual. The extra money they needed to pay this time was a little more than usual. Times, and they have a tough attitude and can't negotiate the price. If it hadn't been for the inexplicable loss of many ships for freight recently, they wouldn't have reluctantly agreed to raise the price. I heard news that there have been many ships salvaging something near here recently. It seems to be some kind of treasure, another businessman whispered. At this moment, a cold look suddenly flashed in the eyes of one of the women. She looked back and saw a young girl in black clothes appearing behind her. "Excuse me, my niece is here," she said to several people with a smile. "Go ahead. Let's chat for a while and then go in. The sea breeze is strong here." Several businessmen smiled kindly in return. The businesswoman walked in the direction of her niece. "What's going on?" Her eyes suddenly turned red, and she was clearly a vampire hiding in human form. "Jelena is in charge. There is a vampire from the Holy Fist Palace who seems to have followed us on board. The girl looks young, but she is actually over 100 years old. She looked a little solemn. I have been observing her, but just now, I didn't expect that she disappeared all of a sudden. I will come over and report to you right away." Galena is a high-ranking vampire of the Pale family. Although the Patriarch has not expressed his intention to go to war with the Holy Fist Palace, as a member of the old vampire family, she is very sympathetic to the views of the Camarilla and the others in the family. The Holy Fist Palace is the source of all turmoil. The root cause: only by eradicating the Holy Fist Palace and its behind-the-scenes manipulator Garen, can the order of the world be restored. We have participated in 5 high-ranking positions this time, and at least half of the actual fighting high-ranking positions in the entire Blood Alliance are here. We have gathered from all over the world and are the top elites of the entire Blood clan. Even if the enemy is gone, what is there to fear? Galena frowning. "But I always feel something is wrong," the girl said worriedly. "I feel that the vampire should have been following us from the beginning, but we only discovered her now." "You mean her?" "A female vampire," Galena asked. "What rank?" "Should be the lower one." "What are you afraid of for a mere inferior?" Galena was furious. Looking at the obedient female vampire in front of her, she felt very angry. But I always feel that the female vampire is weird," the girl argued. "Okay, I'll go take a look for myself and catch that guy," Galena said calmly. "Go and bring some people to patrol. It's just a fish that slipped through the net." "Okay," the vampire girl could only nod. After watching her subordinates leave, Galena began to walk around alone on the freighter. It seemed like she was taking a casual walk. In fact, her senses were magnified to the extreme and she was always paying attention to the surrounding situation. The cargo ship is very large, and 90% of it is packed with container cargo, which is divided into dark storage warehouses and placed in isolation. Bang! She slowly pushed open the metal door of a warehouse, and a dark space inside suddenly appeared in front of her. Galena walked in casually. She had already checked several warehouses as if taking a casual walk, and now she was in the 5th division. The employee who opened the door patted the door. "You can see for yourself, just call me when you want to lock the door." "Okay, thank you." Galena smiled and stuffed a few bills over her, and the other party immediately left with a smile on her face. Entering the warehouse area, Galena looked around and saw no one there, but she did not relax at all. This warehouse area was the most important place, because this time the core goods were hidden in this large warehouse area. Therefore, Jelena looked at it extremely seriously. Is there something wrong here? There's nothing wrong. It's just that all my main goods are here. I feel a little uneasy if I don't come and take a look, Galina replied subconsciously, but suddenly she felt something was wrong. She turned around and saw a man in a black windbreaker was opening the door of the warehouse. The woman slowly closed it and locked it with a click. The opponent's eyes were faintly glowing red, and he was actually one of the vampires on the ship. It's just that Galina didn't remember that she had such a person. Which class are you in? Didn't I ask you to go to the East District? Galina was a little dissatisfied. The female vampire suddenly gave her a weird smile. The smile was like a doll. It seemed that she had no consciousness of her own at all, just an unconscious smile. Jelena, long time no see, you don't even recognize me anymore. She spoke slowly in a frivolous and lazy tone. Hearing this familiar tone, Galina's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and her eyes instantly became serious, staring closely at the female vampire opposite. That was just a low-level vampire, and he shouldn't have been able to withstand her upper-level suppression. But the other party actually completely ignored this suppression and walked towards her. Holy Fist Palace. Tu Lan was lying naked in a slightly boiling blood pool. The blood-red water exuded an extremely strong fishy smell. This was the highest enjoyment for the vampires, but she didn't feel normal at all. Instead, she frowned and covered most of her body. Soaked in blood. If someone could enter the secret room and see her appearance at this time, they would be able to tell from her lifeless eyes that she has completely lost consciousness. Hiss. The stone door of the room was slowly pushed open, and Garen's figure appeared at the edge of the blood pool, and he gently closed the stone door with his backhand. He looked at Tu Lan in the blood pool, frowned slightly, walked to the side and pressed some button, and the boiling in the blood pool suddenly became much smaller. Tu Ian's naked upper body was also exposed. There was no lust in Garen's eyes. He just walked behind Tu Lan, stood on the edge of the blood pool, and looked down. From his angle, he could just see that Tu Ian's back vest had been deeply pierced by a white raised spike on the edge of the pool, and traces of blood flowed out along the spike, like a steady stream of spring water. No intention of stopping at all. What a wonderful ability, Garen sighed. Using blood can produce the ability to jump in space. The dead apostles in this world also have a powerful side. Hessas also sighed. I just don't know how long it took Tu Lan to commit suicide first and then revive himself in his own bloodline. It's thanks to you that you came up with this method. It takes an unknown amount of time for a death apostle vampire to train her body. Once she gives up, her strength will be greatly reduced. Have you thought of how to compensate her? Garen shook his head slightly. She is indeed dead. Her body died here, and her blood core was broken. She should have turned directly into black ash because there was no blood essence provided by the blood core. However, using the blood pool of the blood race here, she can keep the activity of her body intact. Maintain the original shape. But since there is no blood core, and the essence and blood of other vampires are used as maintenance, doesn't this body no longer have Tu Lan's bloodline? Then what use is she? It seems to me that this essence and blood can only sustain this body for 2 hours at most. Hessas was puzzled. Of course we thought of this too. Garen took out a thick blood with crystal red color from his arms. It looked no different from ordinary human blood. Galen held it gently and carefully, as if to prevent it from being broken. This is the essence and blood that Tu Lan left here with me in advance. No matter what the success or failure there is, I will inject her blood into this body in the last 2 hours, and then welcome her return. You are taking the Death Apostle's resuscitation ability to its extreme. Hessas sighed. Garen smiled slightly. If he can't research this bit of technology, wouldn't it be a waste of his high-precision technology experience in the totem world and even his own transplantation of fused hearts? After all, he was once a top biologist and biochemist. And he didn't worry about this method being copied by the vampires, because the blood essence was obtained by drying alive the old vampires they captured in the last war. For such a small pool, about 100 middle and lower level vampires were killed. Such a price could only keep the body of the dead apostle for 2 hours. Moreover, if there was any danger or threat in the meantime, the body would be completely destroyed, possibly for several hours. Thousands of years of tempering the body were destroyed in one day. This is also why the death apostle Wellington hated Garin so much at the beginning. His body that had been tempered for so many years was accidentally destroyed by Garin, so he looked so weak later on. For this method, even if the dead disciples of the old blood clan develop this method, they can't afford it and don't dare to use it. The number of vampires is getting smaller and smaller in successive wars. Even vampire leaders need their subordinates to occupy resources and power to provide themselves with intelligence and resources. Otherwise, no matter how strong the death apostles are, facing the top thermal weapons of mankind, once they are hit intensively, they can only be destroyed and then revived. Another point, this also involves a moral issue, just like someone in the human world bathes in human blood, and even kills hundreds of people as a result. Once exposed, this person will immediately be classified as a public enemy of mankind. The same goes for the vampire clan, especially with Wan, the weak-minded and peace-loving first leader. And the most important point is that no other dead apostle dares to hand over his body to others to protect it with such confidence, and only the Holy Fist Palace can. Tu Lan was originally convinced by Garin, and she was almost killed by Garin at the beginning. Always under his lustful power, and having never enjoyed the rights and status of a dead apostle, he simply treated himself as a subordinate of the Holy Fist Palace who was only slightly better than his superiors. Anyway, if Garin wanted to kill her, he would have killed her a long time ago, and he would not have kept her until now. She figured it out and didn't care much about it, and cooperated with Garin's experiment. It's a pity that this method can only be used once, before we can find a substitute for the vampire essence and blood. Garin was a little regretful. If he could completely master this method, then he could use Tu Ian's death apostle ability to continuously let the blood clan of Toulon spread to all parts of the world, and if something happens, they can provide instant support. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Do you want to take all the good things by yourself? Hessaz laughed. That's right, Garin smiled. He simply sat down cross-legged, took out a small white alarm clock from his arms and placed it on the ground, quietly guarding Tu Ian's body. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 746. In Freighter Warehouse. Galina's eyes were slightly focused as she stared at the female vampire walking towards her from the opposite side. It was obvious that the other person was just a low-level vampire, but that weird feeling, that inexplicable familiar feeling, made her think of something. Why, you don't recognize me? The female vampire on the other side stopped and stood 10 meters away from her. This position was within reach for a superior person in an instant. So what? The female vampire smiled slightly, and her face melted like a candle, forming a new face automatically as if it were alive again. This face was so familiar that before it was completely formed, Galina stepped back slightly, with a look of surprise on her face. You are Tu Lan, there was even a hint of sharpness in her voice. Give me the mask. Tu Lan stretched out his hand, the smile on his face remained unchanged. What are you talking about? What kind of mask? Galina narrowed her eyes, cold sweat seeped out slightly from her back, and she clenched her palms behind her back tightly. Why ask knowingly? Tu Lan looked around. It should be in this warehouse, right? Come on, I don't want to fight with my former friends. Since you don't want to take action, then go back. With your current strength and level, why do you need to work for the Holy Fist Palace anymore? Galina silently observed the surroundings with the corner of her eyes, in case anyone else appeared, or she was looking for an opportunity to escape. Effectiveness. Tu Lan smiled even sweeter. I am willing to do it now. Is there any place in this world that can give me more happiness than the Holy Fist Palace? G. At this moment, the hull of the ship tilted directly and was stirred up by the strong wind and waves. Galena subconsciously regained her footing, and Tulan suddenly disappeared from her eyes. She suddenly became alert, stepped back, and stretched her arms forward at the same time. Bang! A long, slender, round leg struck her hands hard, from top to bottom, like a battle axe. The long legs and arms intersected, making a dull and strong impact sound. Tulan quickly turned around with a small jump and kicked his legs again. Her speed was extremely fast, and her movements seemed to be accompanied by after images. A series of shadows were dragged out behind her without any pause. Bang! There was another blocking sound. Sidekicks, shovels, and chops were all combined in completely different orders. Tulan alternated his legs and attacked Galena like a violent storm. It's still the same as when I was a kid. While Tulan was attacking, there was a trace of nostalgia in his eyes. Galena stepped back continuously, bumped into the container behind her, and dodged suddenly. Click! The container was smashed, and a large number of glass cans of beans were exploded and scattered on the floor. Tulan Galena stared at the other party with an ugly expression. Why? Why would you, who is so powerful, surrender to the Holy Fist Palace? The two of them suddenly separated and stood a few meters apart. Why? Tulan stretched out his index finger and tapped his chin, looking thoughtful. Ask this question to me when you can defeat me, she laughed. We have grown up together, so let's follow the old rules. Galena said no more, but bowed slightly. She didn't understand why such a powerful Tulan chose to join an organization founded by humans. Ever since they were children in ancient times, they had participated in fighting swordsmanship classes together, and they had never defeated her once. From childhood to adulthood, Tulan stood in her heart like the strongest ruler who could never fail. Maybe not just her, but also the group of girls they grew up with. Tulan will always be the strongest representative. Although so many years have passed, and most of the girl back then may have disappeared, the light she once had can never be forgotten. Powerful, beautiful, lazy. Just like a goddess, you cannot look directly at her. Galena has been chasing 2 eons back, and she has never stopped step by step since she became a vampire. Up to now, Tulan has become a dead apostle and has crossed this huge ravine that can be called a natural chasm. She is always so beautiful and powerful at any time. Looking at this former friend in front of him, Tulan could only feel emotion in his heart. They grew up together thousands of years ago, experienced wars, lived in the cities of ancient Greece for decades, and struggled to survive together in the blood chaos. That period of time will always be her most unforgettable. She has taken care of them since they were little, and always stands up for them whenever they encounter difficulties, making all the girls think of her as the strongest and most perfect image in their hearts. She is always smiling, always dazzling, and always fearless. But no one knows that even she will be afraid and frightened. What they will always see is her perfect side. Jelena, give up and hand over the mask, I will be gentler. 2 Ian's right leg suddenly drew an arc in the air, and the speed still produced overlapping after images, which looked like countless long legs superimposed one after another. What she answered was a vicious knee strike. Galena rushed out, raised her right knee, and grabbed 2 Ian's shoulders with both hands. Bang! With their knees blocked, the two were entangled, their hands and feet colliding violently, and a series of violent explosions exploded from between the two. Do! Tulan punched Galena, but it made a sound like wood. The area where Galena was hit in the abdomen quickly turned into wood, and then returned to the shattered area, and new lignified flesh and blood grew, but he returned to his uninjured state in the blink of an eye. Is it hardwood? Galena, you are still so naive. Tulan licked his lips. Laugh. Her figure suddenly dragged out a long after image, as if she suddenly split into 3 or 4 human figures. She circled around Galena, and then the 3 or 4 human figures crashed into the middle at the same time. Galena's body rose into the air, just in time to avoid the siege. A silver chain whipped out of her hand, and it seemed to scatter around. However, her head suddenly hurt, and her movements suddenly stopped. Puff! A sharp pain instantly spread from her chest and spread throughout her body. Galena was kicked directly in the chest by Tu-Lan, who appeared instantly, and her whole body shot straight out like a cannonball, hitting the iron sheet on the top of the warehouse and sinking into it. Following the crisp footsteps of leather boots, Tu-Lan walked to the wall beneath her and raised his head. Pure speed, strength, this is your blood clan's holy magic ability. It seems that we are indeed sisters, even the routes we take are so similar. Or maybe we used to be so similar. Seeing the disappointment in Galena's eyes, Tu-Lan suddenly felt a wave of irritation in his heart. She is not a perfect ruler, she is also an ordinary person who can be happy, fearful, angry, and jealous. Why do these people always beautify her again and again, and try to instill their fictitious impressions into her again and again, and then showing disappointment again and again? That sister was like this back then, and now Galena is like this. Don't look at me like that. The smile on her face disappeared. But Galena didn't seem to hear it. She had only just entered the upper level, and her actual combat ability was not very strong, so this time she was only responsible for the hidden line and did not participate in the battle. Now facing Tu-Lan's unconscious level suppression, her body felt a little sluggish and unable to move. But she didn't seem to hear it, and still stared at Tu-Lan quietly with disappointed eyes. I said, don't look at me like that. Tu-Lan suddenly became angry, and an afterimage appeared in front of her, giving her a hard elbow. Puff! The blood was splashed out, spurted out from Galena's mouth, and splashed all over Tu-Lan. Under the suppression of the rank, even the blood of the upper-ranking vampires lost its activity and could not automatically return to her body. Can lose a lot of blood like ordinary people. Jelena Tu-Lan was sprayed with blood, and she suddenly seemed to wake up, with a trace of distress in her eyes. She reached out her hand and gently touched Galena's face. Why are you so stubborn? Galena still didn't speak, just stared at her quietly, with a trace of disappointment and sorrow in her eyes. What a disgusting look, tear. Tu-Lan tore off Galena's clothes, leaving her entire upper body completely naked. She roughly reached out her hand and pinched Galena's breasts. Where is the mask? Hiss. Blood splattered. Tu-Lan actually tore off Galena's left breast in one go. There was no pity or hesitation in her eyes, only coldness. Tell me, where is the mask? The pain caused beads of sweat to form on Galena's forehead. She took a few breaths, gritted her teeth and turned away. It would be better if it were Rosna. If it were her, she would have told me obediently, Tu-Lan said lightly, looking at Galena's stubborn face. She was vaguely lost in memories. The sleepless face will push the vampires into the bottomless abyss. As a vampire, you actually volunteered to serve humanity, you traitor, Galena spat viciously, but Tu-Lan dodged it. I will follow whichever side can give me happiness, and I will follow whichever side can give me strength. This principle is very simple, isn't it? Tu-Lan answered matter-of-factly. The two of them were hanging on the metal wall of the warehouse. Tu-Lan penetrated the wall with one hand and hung in mid-air, while Galena was directly embedded into the wall and was suppressed by the level so that she could not move. It seems that this is the only way to do it. Tu-Lan calmed down, his eyes gradually filled with black whirlpools, and met Galena's eyes. The vampire control technique is a special suppression ability that only high-level vampires can use against low-level vampires. This is a natural ability, equivalent to the human control technique. But the strange thing is that there is only a hint of ridicule in Galena's eyes, and she is not controlled by the control technique at all. Give up. All of our superiors who hold secrets have accepted the temporary blessing of the Death Apostles clan leader's power and are not affected by the control technique. Tu Lan snorted coldly and put away his control technique. The problem now is that she is short of time. If she cannot find the mask as soon as possible, the body there will be exhausted in 2 hours, and she must rush back. Bang! She knocked Galina unconscious with one punch, dragged her down, put her on her shoulders, and landed lightly. She has completely controlled the surrounding guards here with her hallucination ability, and no sound can be heard from further away, so it has been so long that the vampires in other places have not discovered it. Of course, she is not afraid. Even if she is discovered, she can just forcefully control the ship. It's just that it takes too much time. The ruthless look in his eyes flashed away. Tu Lan glanced at the mountains of warehouse containers and made a ruthless decision in his heart. She took out the phone on her body, quickly checked whether there was surveillance, and then immediately dialed a series of complicated numbers. The voice only rang once, and the call was immediately connected. Lord Tolan. Locate the location of my mobile phone and send a boat to pick it up immediately, Tu Lan said in a deep voice. There was silence for a while, as if they were positioning themselves, and after a while. Understood, we will mobilize the Navy immediately and we will arrive in an hour. Be sure to bring some naval personnel to take over the ships and freighters. Clear. After hanging up the phone, Tu Lan slowly pushed open the warehouse door while carrying Galina, and his figure quickly disappeared into the freighter corridor. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 747. Half an hour later. The entire cargo ship suddenly changed direction and headed towards a certain naval port in the United States at full speed. Gunshots and screams were heard from time to time on the boat. It was the vampires controlled by Tu Ian's control skills who were killing their companions. Tu Lan was staying in the control room with a tired look on his face. The hypnotized vampire captain was speeding towards the redirected route honestly. But even with her level and strength as a Death Apostle, it would be tiring to control so many vampires in a short period of time. After all, the Dead Apostles are just a slightly stronger vampire than the higher-ranking vampires. Their biggest advantage is mainly their immortality. In fact, the gap between them and the upper-ranked vampires in other aspects is not as big as imagined. At most, one Death Apostle is equivalent to the combined combat power of 4 or 5 superiors, except of course the Pale One. Therefore, the strongest point of the Dead Apostles is their immortality, and their own qualities are not too strong. Controlling so many vampires in a short time is also a big burden for the Dead Apostles. Fortunately, Tu Lan practices Huanlu Fist and uses the Huanlu Quan technique can affect and control the humans on the ship, but this technique creates short-term hallucinations, or can create amnesia effects, but it is powerless to modify the memory effect. It is a very sophisticated modification of the brain, so you can only use blood control techniques as the main method, and Huanlu Fist as a supplement. The effect was pretty good, as it barely controlled the direction of the entire huge freighter. An hour has passed now. Night time. Is the mask fake? Hassan was hiding on the back of a black reef on the coast, holding his mobile phone in his hand and listening to the voices coming from there. Tu Lan has succeeded, come back, Jia Long said calmly on the phone. Reluctantly, Hassan took out the 2 masks he was wearing and inspected them carefully. After taking a closer look, he vaguely discovered that this mask did not seem to have a great sense of history. You can find traces of old age. An ordinary person might not be able to spot it, but with his advanced 5 senses, he could indeed detect some subtle things that were wrong. Bang! The mask was hit hard on the reef and exploded into countless fragments, leaving a large gap in the reef. Hoseman's face turned cold. He was actually tricked by the vampires. This is the first time since his debut that he has suffered such a big loss. Pressing the injury on his shoulder, his expression became colder and colder. "I understand," he whispered into the phone. Garen seemed to have guessed that he was losing his temper, so he just hummed and hung up the phone. Tulan is a death apostle, so he can't do anything about it, but there should be a mask on Dam's side. A hint of coldness flashed across Hoseman's face. He took out his cell phone again and started trying to make a call. A list of powerful friends and connections flowed through his mind, but after looking at the missed calls on his cell phone, he quickly settled on the best candidate. After a while the number was dialed. "Hello, I'm Hoseman, is this Miss Munehiriko? I need a little favor from you here. On a luxury cruise ship." As soon as Zangariko sat down in her room in shock, her cell phone rang. After looking at the caller, it turned out to be Hoseman, who had left earlier. Her expression condensed, a hint of joy flashed in her eyes, and she quickly picked up her phone and answered the call. "Hello. I'm Rico, Mr. Hoseman? What do you want me to help you with?" Okay, I understand." After hanging up the phone, Zangariko breathed a deep sigh of relief. There were so many things in her mind that she wanted to ask, but after she answered the phone just now, her mind went blank and she didn't ask anything. Who do Horseman and those two people who look like they are filming a movie belong to? She had heard rumors about the Extraordinary World Circle before, but she always thought they were just rumors, just fiction and exaggeration, but she didn't expect that she would have the opportunity to really see such a scene today. She quickly made a few calls to make arrangements as requested by Hoseman. She hesitated for a while and finally dialed her father's number. But after getting through, she hesitated and just told her father about her arrangements, but she didn't mention any news about the cruise ship. She stood up and walked out of the cabin, only to see a pale young woman guarding her door. She recognized her as the bodyguard who had been following Hoseman. "It's still very dangerous on the ship now, so it's better for you not to come out." Okay, Zangariko nodded and returned to the room. It seems that the attackers have been expelled from the ship, or the attackers have left. It was safe for the time being, and she let out a long sigh of relief. Returning to the room, she suddenly thought of some records about the sleepless face that she had seen in family books. Her family had acquired a large collection of books after the decline of an ancient European family. She had also been particularly fond of reading books since she was a child. "I have gone into it and read a lot, and I also have a certain understanding of the sleepless face mask that Hoseman is looking for. There is a detailed record about this mask in those classics. After the 12 masks are collected, the clues to the final mask must be found at a certain location. According to the ancient family's item-by-item speculations, there are 2 possibilities for the location of that location, all of which are recorded in the book. The thing was originally just a record of ancient historical and archaeological knowledge, with only collection value, but now that she thought about it, Zangariko felt a faint feeling of pounding in her chest. She realized that this might be an opportunity to get in touch with the extraordinary world. Dam climbed out of the underground palace exhausted. The moonlight outside shone down and fell on him, reflecting a pale body. Laugh. Fine lines of blood suddenly shot out on the skin of his arms and thighs. After quickly tapping a few acupuncture points to stop the bleeding, Dam propped up his body and ran towards the response point reluctantly. This is the result of a serious overdraft caused by using the ultimate secret that you cannot master after opening the first star. The transmitter hidden on his body had been destroyed in the fierce battle just now. Now there was no way to notify the Sith and others outside, so he had to drive out himself. Staggering out of the temple's stupa forest, he ducked out of the temple through dark corners and came to the dark alley on the side. "Where are the things?" Sith appeared at the entrance of the alley with a few people. "Here I am." "Let's go now," Dam said weakly. Sis looked at Dam's weak look, with a hint of coldness and hesitation in his eyes. He was hesitating whether to kill him right here. The opponent was so weak and he had a lot of people around him. If he did it, it might be possible to succeed. After getting the mask, it was also a good reason to say that Dam died in a vampire attack. The only thing I'm worried about is whether Dam is really that weak, whether it's true or just pretending. The Sith could not resist the allure of the mask. This is an opportunity to extend your life and improve your martial arts. Dam and Hoseman didn't see that in just a few years, they had reached the upper level under the training of the boxing saint. At such a speed, if it were them, they should be able to reach the upper level as well. Since it only takes a few years for the master of boxing to teach a high-ranking person, he probably won't care too much about the death of a high-ranking person. Involuntarily, Sith's eyes changed when he looked at Dam. I informed the intelligence center before I came, and they will send someone to pick them up right away. Before the vampires arrive, let's leave immediately. Dam's eyes flashed slightly, and he said quickly. The stern look in Sith's eyes subsided slightly. Everyone, protect the marshal, we will evacuate immediately. He waved his hand, and the people from the surrounding families quickly came up to support Dam, and the group quickly evacuated from the alley. Holy Fist Palace. Garen opened his eyes and looked at the alarm clock. There were still a few minutes left. He reached out and held the blood bottle, hanging it above Tulan. Crush the blood bottle with a snap, and the blood inside immediately drips slowly, like the thickest oily liquid, or something like syrup, slowly dripping on Ian's head and forehead. The strange thing is that less than a second after the blood dripped down, the blood immediately penetrated into Ian's skin without leaving any trace, as if it was completely absorbed by the skin. Laugh. Tulan in the blood pool suddenly opened his eyes, and the dilated pupils in his eyes quickly shrank. Hiss. She took a deep breath, then exhaled, her chest swelling up like an airbag and then suddenly sinking deep. How is it? Garen asked in a low voice. Fortunately, it's been handed over. Tulan nodded. Without caring about his naked body, he stood up from the blood pool, pulled off a gauze dress from the rack nearby and put it on. I got 2 masks here, but they are hidden somewhere inside the freighter. They need to be checked. You need to ask someone more careful to go there, she said quickly. No problem, Garen said clearly. 2 masks. What a good news. There is also bad news. Tulan frowned. I got the news from an old friend. All the dead disciples of the vampire clan have disappeared. They are all gone. Going to find the remaining masks? Garen asked her. You know, Tulan was slightly shocked. Galen's face was calm. It's not difficult to guess his second soul seed was now imminent and could be condensed at any time, but he always felt that something was missing. Although the second soul seed was not completely condensed and hatched, his energy and spirit reached an unprecedented peak. His heart was empty and light, like a pure and flawless water mirror without a single ripple. At the critical moment when the soul is condensed, there must not be too many distracting thoughts. Only the purest thoughts can condense all the power of the soul and make it highly concentrated. This is also a little trick Hesaz taught him, which can speed up the concentration. Aren't you afraid that they will destroy the mask immediately after they get it? Tulan asked doubtfully. If they get the mask, they won't destroy it easily, Garen said calmly. No one will be willing to give up this opportunity. This can be the first opportunity to break the myth of the immortality of the dead apostles. Once the final mask is obtained and the ancestors' bloodline is achieved, it will be able to pose a substantial threat and suppression to other dead apostles. The dead apostles will no longer be a symbol of immortality. At that time, the one who has obtained the ancestors' bloodline will be the real strongest in the world. The only master of the big one. Even if Garen's power reaches this level now, he would not dare to directly engage in an all-out war with the vampire Death Apostles, because he cannot kill the Death Apostles, and being unable to kill them means that both sides will suffer, and the fish will die and the net will be broken. This is not what Garen wants to see, nor is it what the vampires want to see. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 748. A few days later, the vampires sent people everywhere to search for the whereabouts of Dam and Hoseman, but the dead apostles were still missing. Due to the lack of ancient intelligence, the Holy Fist Palace did not know the specific whereabouts of the dead apostles, so it could only wait quietly and secretly send people to respond. However, the effect was greatly reduced due to the obstruction of the vampires. The two sides have had frictions in some cities many times, but they have restrained themselves from causing large-scale conflicts, only small-scale games. The weather in the United States is gradually entering spring, and at this time, Ningruoxi, who has returned from Grando, finally brings back Raphael and his relatives and enters the small town residence at the foot of the Holy Fist Palace. Is this the Holy Fist Palace? Raphael looked up at the majestic white snow-capped mountains. The top of the mountain could not be seen, only large white clouds forming a sea of clouds blocked the view and floated on the mountainside. The person leading the way quickly answered. Yes, this is the headquarters of the Holy Fist Palace, now the Waterbird Fist Temple and the Shadow Fist Temple. The three guides were all wearing black robes, and Ningruoxi was the same, walking in the middle. Hearing this, he turned around and smiled at Raphael. The teacher already knows that you are coming, and has set up a banquet up there. In addition, this mountain road will take more than 2 hours to climb. Of course, we will use a suspension car on the side to replace part of the journey, which will be easier. Is there no road up the mountain here? Raphael was a little confused. She went up the mountain alone, and everyone else who came with them was left in the town below. It was originally planned to be built, but in order to maintain the original appearance of the mountain, and hiking up the mountain like this is also an exercise for many martial arts practitioners. This kind of exercise is good for the mind and body, so no one insists on building the road. Ningruo 11 replied with a smile. The group of people continued to move up the mountain road, and occasionally encountered martial arts practitioners coming down the mountain. Most of them are young people, all led by special personnel, all dressed in black robes, like religious pilgrims, with a sacred look on their faces. Occasionally, you can see a martial artist alone, with a weathered face, a determined expression, and tattered clothes. Some are even as skinny as a stick, with sallow complexion and skinny muscles, and are not fully clothed. These people were still walking up the mountain step by step. Facing the thin air that was getting higher and colder, they didn't even flinch. Fortunately, the mountain path has been significantly widened, with a width of 7 or 8 meters. Neat white steps have been built, and there are hemispherical white stone pavilions at regular intervals for people to rest. Raphael looked over all the way, feeling secretly frightened. These martial arts masters are all ordinary human beings, and they do not have the fluctuations of vampires or wizards. However, they are obviously just ordinary people, but they still show such perseverance. It is said that the Holy Fist Palace has only been established for a few years, but such sincere believers have appeared. One can imagine the status of this organization in the hearts of human martial arts practitioners. These are ascetics. Not long ago, after the exchange of world boxing skills gathered at the Holy Fist Palace, the reputation of my teacher as a world boxing master spread out. As the only remaining great master martial artist in the world, many martial arts ascetics will come here to seek advice. Ningruoxi explained. According to the regulations of the Holy Fist Palace, if you can walk on the ascetic path from the foot of the Holy Fist Mountain without any supplies, directly to the Holy Fist Palace, you are eligible to join the palace after a free test. Isn't this very simple? It only takes more than 2 hours on the mountain road. Even ordinary people and stronger people can hike up the mountain, Raphael said, puzzled. If only it were that simple. Go this way. Ningruoxi took Raphael and turned to the left, leaving the ascetic path and walking on another straight road with more people. You can still see many people coming down from the mountain on the road, and the flow of people is much greater than before. Many of these people appear to be full of blood and energy, with various decorations and equipment on their bodies, and some even have a faint smell of blood on them. After seeing the costumes of Ningruoxi and others, most of the people who were going down the mountain took the initiative to move out of the way, saluted slightly and waited for a few people to pass by before continuing on the road, showing their respectful attitude. This is the real entrance to the mountain, and the ascetic path continues upward from the road we just took. Ningruoxi returned the greetings one by one and waited until there were fewer people before speaking. What's the difference? Raphael asked slightly curiously. Of course there is a difference, and it is very big, Ningruoxi said with a smile. There are guards at regular intervals on the ascetic path. They are all old disciples who are doing voluntary ascetic practice in the Holy Fist Palace. They will treat the ascetics. They give a test at intervals. Some of these tests are even extremely dangerous and life-threatening. For example, one of the tests is to walk 200 meters on a cliff that is only as wide as a palm. If you are not careful, you will be killed. Will fall into the abyss. This is a test of courage and carefulness, as well as other tests of willpower, etc. Ningruoxi also had a look of awe on her face. The other guide next to her couldn't help but interject. Those who can pass the test and reach the Holy Fist Palace must be outstanding elites. They are usually directly promoted as official members and can freely choose to enter the three major departments, the Fighting Club, Nighthawk, and the Holy Fist Palace headquarters. You can choose freely. King-level boxing is the real primitive boxing. Is it very powerful? Raphael asked curiously. As a Sun Witch, she has never cared much about the strength of ordinary people. Now seeing the proud look on that man's face when he spoke, he couldn't help but ask a question. Certainly. That person is a girl and also has a competitive temper. Only the 2 marshals and the 4 generals are qualified to practice the king-level boxing technique. Its power is beyond your imagination. Raphael smiled, a little disapproving. Although he heard that the Holy Fist Palace was very powerful, it was all due to the power of the Fist Saint. Could it be possible to cultivate equally powerful subordinates in just a few years? She didn't believe it. But soon her expression froze because she saw several familiar figures walking down the mountain. They were the vampire witnesses she had met at a witch gathering. They were members of the Ming party. One of them, an old vampire woman, was actually walking down the mountain with a calm expression. The other party obviously did not recognize her. At the beginning, she was just a lower level, the gap was too big, and there was no communication at all. Seeing the old woman slowly walking down the mountain, Raphael's heart suddenly became filled with fear. Soon, she saw vampires exuding the aura of the middle and lower class walking down the mountain, chatting happily with some ordinary humans who looked completely inconspicuous to her, and they actually looked like equals. This made her mouth slightly open and unable to close. Ningruoxi and others saw this with a hint of pride in their hearts. The group quickened their pace and quickly went up the mountain. Soon they arrived at the location of the suspension vehicle. After showing their certificates, they all got on the suspension vehicle and quickly moved up the mountain along the strong steel cable. When the steel cable penetrated the sea of clouds, the surrounding area was completely white and could not be seen to the edge. A strange color flashed in Raphael's eyes. So beautiful. Of course, Ningruoxi smiled. Time passed little by little, and soon the car approached the Holy Fist Palace. The tall and mammoth white building gradually got bigger and bigger, getting closer and closer. A huge cylindrical channel on the side was constantly spewing out water like water. Billowing white gas. What is that? It's emitted, Raphael asked, pointing to the white air. A special kind of gas is the airflow extracted from the inner cavity of the mountain. Because the temperature is too low, the temperature difference of the water vapor inside is too large, resulting in such a spurt of white gas. It is actually an ordinary ventilation equipment, Ningruo 11 took the trouble to explain. The car approached slowly along the steel cable, and there were several cars in front of it sliding down the mountain along the steel cable. Among them was a man wearing a heavy cloak, who got on the suspended car with a few subordinates, and looked a little ugly. Raphael looked at one of them and felt his heart skip a beat. One of them naturally exuded a violent aura. Looking back with a cold look, his eyes seemed to light up with white light for a moment, which was extremely dazzling. Raphael was horrified and immediately lowered his head. He had a new understanding of the strength of the Holy Fist Palace. After getting off the car, a dedicated person led you into the palace, passing through area after area and entering the cavity inside the mountain. But half an hour later, Raphael was finally led into an area with small warm water fountains everywhere. A familiar figure was standing there waiting for her in a bright stone hall. Ningruoxi led her to the entrance of the stone hall, then stopped and left silently. After entering the stone hall, the stone door behind Raphael slowly closed, and suddenly she and Garin were the only two people left in the stone hall. The white stone hall is flanked by huge floor-to-ceiling glass. You can see the endless sea of white clouds outside, as if you are above the clouds. Long time no see, Raphael. The figure turned around and looked at her calmly. Even though this man had a mask on his face, the sound of his voice still made Raphael instantly recognize him as the former Garin. Yeah, it's been a long time. How long ago was the last time we met? Raphael walked to a seat next to Garin and sat down. It seems that the other party is still the same as before, looking like an ordinary person like before, but she understands that the other party is far from the simple person he was before, or in other words, he has never been simple from the beginning. About a year and 2 months, Garin replied calmly. Now that you're here, take a good rest here. If you want anything, someone will come down the mountain to buy it for you. Or you can live in a small town at the foot of the mountain. Where do Uncle Emma and Sister Vivian live? Raphael's eyes moved slightly. They're all in the small town at the foot of the mountain. Garin didn't hide anything. Then I will go with them. Raphael lowered his head and bit his lip. To be honest, I no longer have any position to say this. Didn't our relationship end silently long ago? Who knows? Garin laughed and gently lifted her chin. Please spend time with my family. It's not convenient for me to spend time with them often, so only you can help me. Don't do this. A trace of anger flashed in Raphael's eyes and she swatted his hand away. I don't like this kind of action. It makes me feel very disrespected. Okay, Garin was stunned, and then he remembered that Raphael was still the leader of the witches after all. Okay, you go and take a rest first. I still have things to deal with. Okay. Raphael turned around and quickly walked towards the door of the stone hall, her cheeks slightly red. Suddenly she felt her waist tighten, and Garin held her waist from behind. Then a touch of warmth left the neck. Don't worry, I will take care of everything. Garin's voice came from behind. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 749. Raphael's whole body froze, his cheeks turned red, and there was a flash of discomfort in his eyes, but it immediately turned into determination. I see. She responded as loudly as a gnat, and immediately broke away from Kai Galen's arms and pushed out the door. Close the stone door with your backhand. Raphael was led towards his room by someone special. Behind the girl who led the way, she lowered her face and felt a little heavy in her heart. For the mission of the Witch King's mother, Mother of Lions, please bless me to complete the mission smoothly. All kinds of complicated thoughts were constantly surging in her mind. Following her own control, her consciousness fell into a semi-confused state, and she could only follow the girl instinctively. In this state, a voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Henji, you did a good job without making Garin suspicious. Mother of the Witch King, Raphael was suddenly surprised and shouted loudly in his heart. Don't worry. Although that person is very powerful, he is not an invincible dead apostle after all. As long as he is not a dead apostle, there will definitely be flaws. You need to wait for the opportunity and be patient. Patience, the voice said, slowly disappear. Raphael knew that this was the departure of the Lion Mother, and she suddenly sobered up, feeling a little disappointed. She is one of the 45 daughters of the Lion Mother, the Witch King, and she is the most critical member to be selected as a member of this plan. When Hongji thought of her mission, she became more determined. Thinking that she might have to attack a few innocent ordinary people, she felt a hint of unbearability in her heart, but she was immediately suppressed. The Holy Fist Palace is the source of all turmoil, and Fist Saint Gallen is the root of the Holy Fist Palace. In order to restore the world order to orthodoxy, everything I do is for order. When she thought of this, the divine brilliance reappeared in her eyes. Now, let's observe the internal situation of the Holy Fist Palace first, and find out specifically the branches of the armed forces. Then we can go to the foot of the mountain. She quickly had a plan in her mind. In the stone hall, Garen stood calmly beside a water-spraying stone pillar in the center. A black-clothed vampire subordinate was standing next to him and reporting the situation in a low voice. We have searched all relevant areas and all possible places. So far, we still haven't found any news about Marshal Dam. The vampire man covered his face and could not see his face, and reported in a low voice. The intelligence department is sure that he disappeared 3 days ago. Where is the Sith? Garen frowned slightly. Master Sith did not come back in advance because he had to arrange follow-up cleanup work. He only arranged for secret personnel to escort Marshal Dam. However, he was attacked midway and all the personnel disappeared. Looking at the traces left on the site, it looked like a vampire attack. But we tried every means but still couldn't find out the whereabouts of the Marshal. I'm extremely sorry, the vampire man lowered his head. Damn, Garen thought lightly, he should have a mask on his hand. The possibility of the vampire taking action is indeed very high. Indeed, and the key point is that our power network can only cover the United States, and other areas are still dominated by the influence of the Blood Clan. This also prevents us from searching on a large scale. You go down first, Garen nodded. The vampire man respectfully exited the stone hall, leaving only Garen alone. The vampire's actions are very arrogant, Hesaz's voice sounded. Not a vampire, Garen said calmly. Oh? How do you know? Who else would dare to sneak attack a master of Damu's level if he wasn't a vampire? Hesaz also didn't understand how Gallen came to this conclusion. Of course I have my own methods. But what is certain is that it is not a vampire. Garen walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass and looked at the vast sea of white clouds. His eyes seemed to penetrate into infinity and look towards an unknown direction. A hidden valley somewhere in America. Call. 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 It was as heavy as the panting of a beast, like the violent breathing of some ferocious beast that was extremely tired. Dam sat back in a green ravine in the valley, covering himself as much as possible with large broken branches and leaves, and then slowly stretched his limbs. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked extremely haggard, as if he hadn't rested for a long time. In the surrounding green woods, the slightest movement from time to time could make him turn his head and look over, and his nerves became extremely nervous. He really didn't get a chance to rest. After getting the mask, he was attacked on the way back, and all the people he was escorting were killed. Only he tried his best to fight with them, and then escaped quickly. The other party also began to chase him quickly. As he chased and escaped, he could feel that the other party seemed to have the speed to catch up with him. But once he ran to a crowded place, the other party suddenly caught up with him and engaged in a fierce fight. He could only move forward. Escape to more and more remote places. This is forcing him into no man's land. Dam's feet were stuck in the grass and mud in the ditch, his body was covered with grass clippings and bugs, and there were too many scratches on his clothes. His whole body was extremely haggard, and he could not see his original demeanor as a marshal at all. He was hunted for 3 consecutive days and 3 nights without being able to even get a good night's sleep. The high level of stress had long since made his nerves as frightened as a frightened bird. His body became even weaker. He had already activated the first star, and used the water bird fist that he could not control. In the end, the secret evil phoenix soared. The body was severely overdrawn, and now that it has been without rest and recovery for such a long time, the body is even more severely overdrawn. Am I going to die here? There was a trace of unwillingness in Dam's eyes. At this moment, clear footsteps were faintly heard in the woods. The sound was very slow at first, and then paused, as if it felt that he was here, and suddenly moved faster and quickly approached here. We can't run away anymore, a trace of cruelty flashed in Dam's eyes. If you run away any longer, you may not even have a chance to resist. He relaxed his whole body as much as possible, allowing his body that had not rested for a long time to accumulate as much strength as possible, and quietly waited for the opponent's pursuer to quickly approach. 500 meters. 400 meters. 300 meters. 100 meters. Wow! The branches and leaves were lifted up, and a familiar figure appeared in front of Dam. "Hasimon," Dam shouted suddenly. "Sure enough. It's you," he gritted his teeth, and his body that had just relaxed suddenly became tense. There was a hint of deep hatred in his eyes. Hasimon had a calm expression on his face. He was wearing a recently changed black suit and shiny black leather shoes. He looked like an ordinary successful person planning to attend a banquet. But in this valley and woods, this outfit looks extremely weird. He looked at the embarrassed Dam indifferently. "It's really pitiful. You're like this, Dam, you really embarrass the teacher." "I knew it was you." Dam was trembling with hatred. Every time he wanted to rest along the way, he would be overtaken by the other party. Every time he wanted to stop, the other party would immediately approach and refuse to let him go. He rests. He had never known who could grasp his whereabouts so accurately, but now it seemed that only Hasimon could use the connection between the two souls to locate each other. Dam is too weak now to do this, but Hasimon has a way. The two of them practiced water bird fist with one yin and one yang, yin pole water bird fist and yang pole water bird fist. The combination is the real biphase water bird quan. Different from other disciples, the practice of the two is the most extreme among water bird quan and also the most powerful one. The largest practice route. Jia Long once reminded both of them individually that although their power boxing techniques were powerful, they naturally had their own gains and losses. When they were powerful, they also had to pay a price that ordinary people could not imagine. That is, there must be only one difference between the Yinji boxing and the Yangji boxing. Only one person can survive, and only the person who survives can continue to integrate the boxing skills and advance to the peak of Dachan. As for the peak power, even Garen himself doesn't know. Because this route is only a theoretically feasible path deduced by himself, even he, an improver of water bird boxing, doesn't know what power it actually achieves. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, don't you think so, Dam? Hasimon adjusted his glasses and slowly walked towards Dam. The great perfection water bird fist, this is the ultimate pursuit and goal of you and me. You won't succeed, Dam said harshly. Who knows? Hasimon spread his hands and smiled. Actually, I have always been very grateful to the teacher, who gave us this opportunity to go further. He is right, the greater the achievement, the greater the dedication. So look at Quint and Sidon, they are only at the middle level now and cannot even reach the upper level. They can only struggle against a high-level vampire. Why? He paused, and his smile became deeper. That's because the price they paid for martial arts is not high enough. Dam could only grit his teeth. Hasimon looked at him lightly. Our Holy Fist Palace, Shuaniao Kwando, is said to be the holy way of boxing. In fact, others don't know it, but we ourselves don't know it. The so-called holy way is the devil's way. Aren't all the things we practice magic? Otherwise, there will be entering the country so quickly. What magic skills emphasize is the survival of the fittest, the weak and the strong. Damn, his eyes suddenly became sharp. I am stronger than you, so you are destined to be my stepping stone. This is fate. Kill me and you won't feel better. And you don't want the mask anymore. Dam knew that he would not be spared, and the last glimmer of hope ignited in his eyes. Kill you to achieve the holy path. As for the mask, it will naturally be snatched away or destroyed by the vampires. Hoseman smiled slightly. There was a muffled sound under his feet, and he rushed towards Dam like a rocket. His arms it suddenly swelled, getting thicker and darker, as if the entire arm was wrapped with countless veins. The fierce airflow was also fully driven by this punch, as if all the air was attracted by the fist. The forest was even slightly blackened by the rapid surge of air. Go with peace of mind. I will take good care of your family. Boom. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 750. Click. Lightning streaked across the sky. A hall in the Holy Fist Palace was illuminated brightly for a moment. Garen stood in the dark hall. Unknowingly, he had been standing here all afternoon. For some reason, he has always felt very irritable recently. This time, he spent an entire afternoon and still could not find the source of this irritability. Moreover, perhaps because of practicing the Holy Phoenix scripture, he always felt that his emotional fluctuations were getting smaller and smaller, and his emotions seemed to be getting colder and colder. I used to be able to touch many things, but now I feel increasingly cold. Click. Lightning flashed across, illuminating the hall in blue and white for an instant. Garen was alone in the hall, and his figure was dragged out for a moment by the light of lightning. This world. He looked out the window at the endless sea of clouds. It's repelling me. You feel it? Hesaz's weak voice came out vaguely. You came across from the Mother River by accident. Your original purpose was not to come here. It was just a mistake to come to this world. This world has no consciousness. How could such a phenomenon occur? Garen was puzzled. Yes, most of the worlds have no consciousness, and the shapes of each world are also different, just like there are thousands of plants with different types. Hesaz whispered, but you have practiced the Holy Phoenix scripture. The scripture is ruthless and inexorable. Its purpose is to push the spirit to the highest state, which requires a large amount of external resources and energy. This is actually equivalent to plundering the world. Any behavior that absorbs external energy to strengthen itself will naturally trigger a chain reaction. Because this is the change that breaks the balance cycle. Garen was silent for a while, then nodded slightly. I understand what you mean. Just like a certain type of beast in the mountain forest suddenly becomes more powerful and needs more and more food. A mountain forest cannot meet its needs, but will inevitably expand its scope and destroy other surrounding areas. Natural cycle balance. To be more precise, it means overabsorbing energy and then underexporting it, just like cancer cells in the human body, which are deformed and distorted. If too much energy originally belongs to other functions is plundered, it will cause the natural cycle to break or even collapse. Eventually there will be some kind of huge environmental change. And such changes have now been noticed by some creatures in this world, and they are taking action. Hesaz explained. This is also the true meaning of the Holy Phoenix scripture, which is too extreme. It seems that this is the source of my irritability. Garen nodded. My instinctive five senses are getting sharper and sharper, and I am more and more able to sense threats to myself in the future. As your strength becomes more and more powerful, your influence on the surrounding nature will become greater and greater. This is inevitable, and such amplified influence will become clues that can be observed and grasped by others. Originally you didn't have to do this, but the Holy Phoenix manual was too overbearing and its plundering methods were extreme, which also led to intensified changes in the environment. Hesaz replied calmly. Garen stopped talking and just looked quietly at the vast sea of white clouds below the window. Click. A flash of lightning flashed. The heavy rain fell in torrents, and the wind blew up pieces like traces of gauze curtains. Dam was covered in blood, leaning against the cold green mountain wall behind him, staring at Haseman not far across the way. The two stood in the heavy rain without any intention of hiding from the rain. The surrounding ground is full of traces of pits, and the soil in many traces is still fresh red and yellow. It was obviously just smashed out, and it was being quickly filled with rain at this time. The raindrops caused the surrounding leaves, branches and grass to sway downwards, and the wind whistled, sounding like a human cry or the ghostly cry of some animal. "Give up." Hoseman's suit was completely wet, but he remained expressionless and calmly looked at Dam not far away. The rain kept sliding down his cheeks, wetting his hair and clinging to his forehead. They had been fighting continuously in the valley for a long time. In order to prepare for Dam's final counterattack, Haseman, perhaps in order to win without injury, never pressed too hard, but chased Dam step by step, stepping forward from time to time. Fight for a few times and keep him in a state of tension to tire him out. This effect is indeed very good. Now Damu is completely exhausted and does not even want to move. In order to save energy, he just leans against the mountain wall. He has not eaten at all in the past few days and has already become more and more exhausted. "You have no chance," Haseman said lightly. "I was attacked by you after completing my mission." "The teacher will not leave me alone," Dam said harshly. "I attacked my fellow disciples regardless of the overall situation, and the whereabouts of your cousin are also in my hands." "You are so naive," Hoseman suddenly laughed. "You actually think I really like that cousin?" He raised his head and glanced at the sky. "It's almost time." He slowly took off his glasses, revealing his cold and sharp narrow eyes. After taking off his glasses, he combed his hair back, and it suddenly turned into a neat slicked back hair. His whole person exuded an indescribable aura. "No one can live without weaknesses." Damn, a hint of evil smile appeared on Haseman's fair and handsome face. "Let's finish it." He stretched out his hands, with their fingers facing each other, and the palms in the middle formed a heart shape. Boom! In the heavy rain, his figure burst open the rain curtain. In the field of vision that only warriors could see, a large mass of black energy suddenly exploded around him, turning into a terrifying dragon-headed black shadow, roaring and rushing towards Dam. "Clouded leopard!" Haseman let out a low roar, and his whole body pounced forward in the rain. It stretched out like a real cheetah and pounced forward. The raindrops in the air were torn and splashed. Because of the speed, it actually stretched out a long path in the heavy rain. Of cavity. The strength of the upper level exploded out in full force, gathering in the palms of Hoseman's hands. Bang! His hands dug deeply into the mountain wall, causing the entire mountain wall to shatter and collapse in. Dam just managed to avoid the blow, but he was still hit by the aftermath. The raindrops that flew away with such force hit him like bullets, actually leaving several wounds. "Blood Knight!" He roared and threw out his remaining 2 silk strings, but they were completely exposed in the rain and had no concealing effect at all, so they were easily dodged by Haseman. "Even God wants to kill me." Damu staggered towards the rain curtain on the left, feeling increasingly sad in his heart. The electrical appliances such as mobile phones on his body had been destroyed immediately. He wanted to ask for help, but was deliberately driven here by Hoseman. "Am I really going to die here?" Dam heard the sound of Haseman chasing through the air from behind. "Teacher." The last thing that came to his mind was the scene when Garen first taught them water bird boxing. The memories of that scene were the starting point for him to enter the martial arts hall. "Polar bear!" A low roar sounded from behind. Bang! Dam felt a pain in his chest. In fact, he had already felt the sound of breaking through the air behind him, but his body could no longer keep up with his consciousness. He tried to avoid it, but he was still hit on the vest. Puff! He lowered his head and spat out a mouthful of blood, then fell to his knees in the dark night rain. Bang! There was another burst of severe pain, and the area on the back directly opposite the heart was hit hard by a palm again. The huge and powerful force penetrated the muscles and bones, accurately hit the heart, and then exploded. This is the secret power of the water bird that Hoseman is proud of. It can be penetrated into the opponent's body and detonated at any time. Unlike Dam's own detonating blood, Hoseman's detonation is to gather strength, and then concentrate the explosion to kill in one blow. Goodbye, Dam. Hoseman's voice came from behind. Dam's vision blurred, and then gradually darkened, and everything began to darken, from blurry to slowly dark, to nothing at all. He felt the strength in his body draining away rapidly, and there was an empty feeling in his heart. I'm dying. He was completely plunged into darkness, and the sound of rain outside began to become weaker and smaller, until he could hear nothing, and the smell of water vapor could no longer be smelled in his nose. Laugh. A feeling like a balloon deflating came out of his body, and Dam felt that something that seemed very important to him was being quickly pulled away and leaked. Gradually, his consciousness fell into complete darkness. Rumbles of thunder sounded from the sky. Hoseman stood quietly next to Dam's body, looking at his former best friend. The blood-red aura was flowing out of his body and merged into his black aura. The blood-red aura was like a bloody stream, flowing out continuously from the wound on Dam's back, then crossing the ground and merging into the black shadow at his feet. An increasingly swollen and powerful feeling filled the body and deep inside. Hoseman stretched out his right hand, and the terrifying skin and muscles on his palm, which were originally slightly black, were now faintly wrapped with traces of red blood lines. This bloodline runs along the skin on the surface of the body, like a big red net, covering the entire body surface. Power. This kind of power he. An endless sense of fullness and power filled Hoseman's heart. He could feel that the trace of soul attraction deep in his spirit was constantly being nourished by this power. Then some strange changes gradually occurred. That hint of aura is getting stronger and stronger, more and more swollen. Boom. There was a bang. I don't know if it was thunder or an explosion in my heart. Hoseman's body trembled suddenly, and he vaguely seemed to see a figure covered in black gauze suddenly walking out of the rain curtain. Who are you? The other party's figure was looming in the rain curtain, as if it was almost transparent. It gives people an illusory and weird feeling. It doesn't matter who I am, the person came in a low voice. His voice was neither male nor female and could not be distinguished by gender. The important thing is that you are at a very critical stage now. Oh, Hoseman became more alert. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 751. Your soul has undergone a mutation, and this mutation has some strange changes. Let me help you. Before he finished speaking, the other party suddenly disappeared. At the moment when it disappeared, Hoseman suddenly felt a pain in his head. Ah! He threw his head back and roared. The severe pain surged out in an instant, catching him off guard, as if a giant hammer hit his head hard. For a moment, all five senses were filled with intense pain. A tearing sound. In a daze, Hoseman seemed to hear the sound of something being torn apart. Then a strange sense of freedom came over him. You are free, a voice echoed in the rain. Hoseman lowered his head in confusion, only to see that his body had returned to normal, and everything just now seemed to be just an illusion. And the strange feeling that had been controlled by Garen in the deepest part of his heart had completely disappeared at this time. Am I free? He asked himself in a low voice. He felt as if he had snatched something away from the teacher. This feeling is inexplicably weird and wonderful. He felt an unprecedented sense of power at this moment, and endless power was continuously circulating inside his body, as if one punch could crack the earth and crush anything in front of him. He knelt down, quickly found the intact mask from Dam's body, and put it tightly into his arms. We can't go back, he murmured in a low voice, took one last look at Dam's body, and disappeared directly into the heavy rain. Holy Fist Palace. Garen suddenly felt a tearing pain coming from his mind. Well. He suddenly covered his head and stood in the middle of the dark hall, almost uncontrollably breaking out in cold sweat. This is. The pain was strange, yet eerily sudden. Suddenly he raised his head and looked somewhere outside the palace in a certain direction. It's the soul guide. Someone broke away from my control. Tear and robbed a part of my soul guide. Who is it? He was shocked. He closed his eyes and quickly and carefully sensed the soul-attracting aura flowing out of him. The dense auras were like stars, scattered in his dark spiritual space. At this moment, one of the two largest soul-attracting stars was dimming rapidly, and the other was getting brighter and even changing rapidly. Be transparent. Conveying an inevitable sense of detachment. It's Dam and Hoseman. Galen felt cold. Dam is dead. Hoseman absorbed the spirit of the water bird fist from the other side. But how could he escape the control of my soul guide, and how could he tear apart my soul breath? As I expected, you are in trouble, Garen Hessas whispered. Garen remained silent. However, the waves of headache stimulated the veins on his face to become more and more obvious, giving people a ferocious look. According to the principle, even if Hoseman absorbs and kills Dam, it is impossible to escape from his control, but now it seems that he has really completely plundered part of his soul attractor breath and made it his own. And even successfully escaped from his own mental control. There must be some outside force helping him. Who is it? Who is helping him? Who can help him? Garen asked in a low voice. Losing this trace of soul breath is not a small trouble for him. The soul itself has the characteristics of perfection. Once a part is torn apart, fatal flaws in the soul will appear. If he doesn't make amends quickly, once an opponent of the same level launches a targeted soul attack on him, Garen's current state is likely to be completely defeated in a short period of time. You must repair the wounds in your soul as soon as possible, otherwise, wait for Nadia to appear. She can kill you with just one look, Hessas said solemnly. There is no room for any shortcomings and obvious flaws among masters. One step away, this will be fatal. How could this world have methods targeting souls? Garen felt his headache gradually lessen. His face looked a little ugly. The world is so big, it's normal for some different mysteries to appear. The most important thing now is that you must find Hoseman as soon as possible and take back the breath of your torn soul. For ordinary people, this may be just a very subtle wisp of soul breath, and it will not be a big problem even if it is lost, but for masters, especially top masters, as long as there is a little flaw in the imperfection, this flaw will be a big problem, will be infinitely amplified, Hessas reminded. In a low voice. I was careless. Garen's face turned pale. This was the first time he had suffered such a big loss. In this world, he has been going smoothly and has no opponents at all. Even the dead apostles are not in his eyes. At most, they are just a few cockroaches that cannot be killed. All his energy was focused on Nadia, thinking that only Nadia was his real opponent, but now someone gave him a heavy blow. The soul is extremely important to any life. Even a trace of the soul aura you separate will have an impact on the legion that will make your subordinates become stronger with you, not to mention there are many mysterious effects and influences that we have not discovered. This is a part that cannot be ignored. Garen was silent. He thought about the many strands of soul that he had continuously separated over the past few years. If all of them were forcibly torn apart, his soul would probably be forced into a state of permanent weakness. When he thought of this, he suddenly turned around and walked towards the door. He must take back all the scattered soul guides as soon as possible. Even if this will cause great damage to the strength of his subordinates, he can't care so much at this time. Dam died in battle and Hoseman defected. The consequences of this incident are serious. You want to recycle all the leads? No need, Hessas said. This kind of legion-level introduction cannot be torn at any time. It requires a very special opportunity. Only Dam and Hoseman under your command can have such a change of timing. Others impossible. And tearing it apart once is also very costly to the opponent. This is an action at the soul level and cannot be accomplished easily. Moreover, the influence of soul aura on the body cannot overlap. The effect of losing one trace is the same as losing 100. This kind of loss is insignificant to the total amount of the soul, but it is the most troublesome if it creates gaps and flaws in the perfection of the state and realm. However, although it is not affected, or the possibility of being affected is very low, I still recommend that you take everyone in the palace out for a checkup. If you find any abnormality, you must keep an eye on it carefully. Hessa suggested. The most important thing now is to capture Hasaman. Galen pushed open the door, quickly walked out of the stone hall, and quickly walked towards the student performance hall under the respectful lowered gaze of the guarding disciple outside the door. Dam's death, Hoseman's defection, and the Holy Fist Palace suddenly lost two high-level ones. This had a great impact on the entire Holy Fist Palace. He had to make arrangements immediately and solve the problem of soul tearing. Only by killing Hasaman can he completely recover his lost soul and make up for the shortcomings of his soul. Raphael stood quietly at the door of the secret room in the palace. There was no one around, and the only patrolman had just passed by. At this time, there was a gap for patrolling. There are a total of 15 such secret rooms in the Holy Fist Palace, and she has already explored more than 10 of them. Her purpose is to find the sleepless face masks collected by the Holy Fist Palace. There are no less than 6 masks collected in the entire Holy Fist Palace. They must be hidden somewhere hidden. As long as she finds it, she can quickly create a mask with the witchcraft prepared by the Witch King's mother and steal the truth away. Gently pushing open the stone door of the secret room, Raphael quietly walked in and quickly glanced around. Apart from the necessary lighting, candlesticks, tables, and chairs, there were no other furnishings. She quickly took out a small white accessory as a decoration on her skirt and shook it gently. Suddenly, a faint white light emitted from the accessory, which swept away in the secret room. It's like this again. Raphael's eyes dimmed slightly, and he was a little disappointed and prepared to evacuate. Suddenly, the white accessories suddenly lit up with white light again, shining straight on the wall facing the secret room door. Is this? Raphael narrowed his eyes, knowing that the exploratory witchcraft tool given by the Witch King's mother would not react without reason. She walked over quickly, and the white light from the accessory in her hand actually illuminated the wall there, making it as translucent as glass. You can see what's going on inside the wall through the outside. I saw a medium-sized cylindrical cavity inside the wall. There seemed to be a book inside, a thick book with a black shell. Somehow, this book gave Raphael an inexplicable sense of mystery and weirdness. It was as if what she saw was not just a book, but a living creature. This thing must be an important treasure of Galleon. Raphael gritted his teeth, turned his hands over and took out a thin red cardboard from the side pocket of his skirt, with many strange symbols densely written on it that seemed to be written in blood. There are 3 pieces of this kind of cardboard. It is a special magic weapon with the ability to teleport in a short time. It is a one-time precious magic weapon that was made at a great cost. Now this thing has no manufacturing raw materials, and only 5 pieces are left. All of them are in the hands of the Lion Mother, and now in order to deal with Garen, the Witch King's mother, the Lion Mother is willing to take out 3 of them at once so that Raphael can transfer the treasure from the Holy Fist Palace. It's possible to hide in such a secret place. She stretched out her hand to press on the wall and began to carefully check the switches here. Just take something out and put it on the cardboard, then lightly activate it, and it will be delivered instantly. After groping for a while, she quickly found a place on the wall that was slightly smoother and cleaner than other places. She reached out and gently dug there, and suddenly a small ring was pulled out of the wall. Pull hard. There was a slight buzzing sound, and a large rectangular stone suddenly protruded from the wall, with a cylindrical metal pillar embedded in the center of the stone. There are lifting rings on the pillars. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 752. Raphael stepped forward and carefully checked whether there were any mechanisms around the ring. After confirming that it was correct, he was about to reach out and grab the ring. Woo! Woo! Suddenly, a clear alarm sounded throughout the Holy Fist Palace. In just a few seconds, all the students, disciples, external trainers, and middle and high-level officials who were still training in the palace rushed towards the largest martial arts performance hall in the center. Amidst the sound of dense footsteps, groups of palace staff wearing black and white Taoist uniforms hurried past the secret room. The door to the secret room had actually been closed again at this time. Raphael had left the secret room at some point and stood at the door, acting as if he was just passing by. What happened? Raphael grabbed a palace staff disciple whom he had met before. Something big must have happened, otherwise Master Quan Sheng wouldn't have issued an emergency summons. The man replied hastily, with a solemn look on his face, "If you want to know, just come with us to the Central Martial Arts Hall." A big deal. Raphael's heart moved, and he glanced at the corners of the surrounding palace walls, where white monitor electronic eyes suddenly popped up. These electronic eyes were almost the same color as the wall, making it difficult to distinguish. Obviously, because of this emergency, the comprehensive alert system was immediately activated. She couldn't help but secretly rejoice. If she had hesitated just now and came out a little slower, she would have been discovered by surveillance, and it would be impossible to escape from the enemy camp. She nodded without having time to think too much. "Lead the way, let's go together." The man nodded and pulled Raphael to continue to follow the team in front. There were also groups of people running in the corridor behind him, and the sound of footsteps could be heard. In the white arched stone hall, there are cylindrical white stone pillars standing all around, with a string of steel chains hanging in the middle. The blue-black chains are thick and strong. Together with the large stone brick floor style of the ancient stone hall, it gives people a simple and yet simple feeling. Rough, savage, and sacred feeling. Each of the stone bricks on the ground is a large brick with a length and width of more than 3 meters. In other words, it can no longer be called bricks, but is a typical large stone. Groups of students in the palace were like rivers flowing into the sea. They merged in from the large and small entrances and exits around the hall, and soon formed 3 white, black, and red phalanxes of different colors. Bright lights shone down from the surrounding stone walls, compressing everyone's shadow to the position under their feet, illuminating no blind spots. Soon, everyone was almost there. Garin sat in the highest seat of the stone hall. Under his hands were 2 empty black high-backed chairs. Below them were the seats of the 4 generals. On the right side, rows of seats were specially set up for other foreigners who were temporarily stationed here. There were high-level dignitaries, including several generals and senior leaders of large groups. Rhodes and his brother were chatting in a low voice with a leader and director of another group. They seemed to have just taken their seats. The 4 greats will quickly take their seats, followed by a large group of middle and high-level people in the palace below, including personnel from external branches, arranged according to their positions. In addition, several senior members of the resident Woguang Alliance also entered the venue and were placed in VIP seats on the right side of the same level as the 4 generals. As the number of people increased, the huge football field-like hall finally gradually became quiet, showing good discipline. With most of the silence, the VIPs who were still whispering and talking gradually shut up and focused their gazes on Garin, who is in a high position. Garin was dressed in black, with long blonde hair hanging loosely on his shoulders. His body was entangled in the seat like a mountain, giving people a depressing and terrifying feeling of hugeness. His expression was cold and solemn, as if he was thinking about something troublesome. The atmosphere was a little depressing for a while. The whirring siren finally stopped after the last group of people entered. The entire hall fell into complete silence. After a moment of silence, When everyone focused their attention on him, Garen finally spoke slowly. "Here, I have some sad news to share." The originally depressing atmosphere suddenly became even more depressing with these words. Everyone unconsciously concentrated their attention, and even the VIPs who were still casually sat up slightly and became serious. Raphael was also arranged in the VIP seat, quietly looking at Garen in the high position. There was an inexplicable power hovering around that man. The air around his seat seemed to be thick, and he was sitting there alone. One person's aura could faintly suppress the entire aura of so many people present. "You know, there are almost thousands of people present here." While marveling in her heart, she heard Garen continue to speak. "One of the two marshals, Bloody Marshal Dam, unfortunately died in battle." There was a sudden silence in the whole place. It was a death-like silence. Everyone wondered if they had heard wrongly, or if it was a joke that Garen made casually. In an instant, all the attention of thousands of people was focused on Garen. "You heard that right," Garen said calmly, "I'm not kidding either. Dam has already died in the battle." When the voice fell, the first person to react was no one else, but some of Dam's subordinates in red, as well as members of his own family. Then there are the big names in the VIP table who have had many interactions with Dam, and the rest are the students and disciples who have been taught king-level boxing techniques by Dam. Boom! The entire venue was filled with excitement and excitement. Dam died in battle. That was someone at the pinnacle of his level, and he would actually die in battle? Who can kill him? Superior? Or a dead apostle? Could it be that the Blood Clan has officially launched a full-scale siege on the Holy Fist Palace? Everyone is guessing that the death of a high-level master in battle is unbearable pain even for vampires and witches, let alone the new Holy Fist Palace. "I haven't finished what I said." Garen waited for everyone to digest it for a while before speaking again. The root cause of Dam's death in the battle was not the Blood Clan's encirclement and suppression. His eyes scanned the entire place, and everyone he glanced at unconsciously lowered their heads. He was attacked and killed by Hoseman, who was also the marshal. Hoseman has now defected to the Holy Fist Palace. Boom! This time, as soon as the words were finished, a louder noise broke out. Everyone was a little stunned, feeling that their brains could not keep up with the changes. Except for Garen Fist Saint and Tu Lan, the two most powerful marshals in the Holy Fist Palace all disappeared. One died and the other defected. This is probably the biggest breaking news recently. If there were reporters present, I'm afraid the news they would get as soon as possible would be enough to sell the newspapers that they were jealous of. You must know that the Holy Fist Palace is now the force that the entire human race is most concerned about fighting against the vampires. It is the gathering place that everyone hopes to gather. The question now is, how to deal with it? This is the first reaction anyone will have after hearing the news. My decision is that from now on, a full pursuit order will be issued to arrest the former boxing marshal Hasiman. Anyone who gets information about his whereabouts will be rewarded with 1 million euros. Those who can kill him will be rewarded with 10 million euros, and I will personally teach the boxing method once and inject vitality into it every 2 years. If I can defeat him, I will personally teach the essence of the king's boxing method and inject vitality into it for 10 years. Garen's voice was like a burst of thunder, reverberating in the hall. No matter what method you use, no matter what means you use, find him. Kill him. Garen's eyes were filled with murderous intent like dark clouds. This murderous intent spread and even made the thousands of people in the entire stone hall find it difficult to breathe. Let everyone be secretly frightened. The eyes of the four generals below were blazing with scorching flames. Only they knew the weight of Galen's words. It was obvious that Hoseman did not just kill Dam, but even did something that made Galen feel angry. Under such circumstances, if the goal can be achieved, then the status in the eyes of the teacher will be greatly increased. It took teacher Garen a few years to get the two marshals to the position. It will not be difficult for others to put in a little more effort. achieve a new high position. Although their strength is only above the average and far inferior to the two marshals, in many cases, victory or defeat cannot be determined by pure strength. Otherwise, everyone will know who is stronger by showing their realm levels and comparing them. Do you need to compete in a martial arts competition? Tu Lan stood in the darkness of the hall, and his eyes quickly exchanged with Quinton Sidon, one of the four generals. One of them controlled the intelligence department, and the other was in charge of the external fighting society network. They both had great power. On the internet, Quinton and Sidon have been communicating a lot with Tu Lan and Ning Ruoxi recently because they also want to learn Huan Lequan, and both of them have become good friends. Of course, Tu Lan will never regard herself as an elder. At this time, several people exchanged glances. The three of them have the most harmonious relationship. When they heard Galleon's reward, everyone was immediately moved. Everything else was fine. It was the injection of vitality that countless big shots outside. What is desired but cannot be obtained? This is a side effect-free method that can extend your life and improve your body's functions. The eyes of some older senior executives of the group also lit up at this time, and their hearts became increasingly hot. Money, martial arts, and lifespan, these three combinations aroused the desires of almost everyone present, covering most people's deepest desires. After 10 years of vitality, this is the first time that Garen has spoken out. In the past, it was only 5 years, but this time it can be injected for 10 years at a time, which is equivalent to extending life by 10 years. Especially for some elderly people, they can live 10 more years. This is simply a good thing that makes people laugh out of their dreams. But as soon as the last sentence was spoken, the first people to react enthusiastically were the VIP seats and the seats of the four generals. Teacher, we are willing to join forces and cooperate with Lord Tu Lan to hunt him down. Quinton stood up suddenly, apparently under the instruction of Tu Lan in the shadow. Tu Lan occupies a very delicate position in the Holy Fist Palace. She is higher than the Marshal, but lower than Galen. No one objects to her being the second strongest person in the palace, but outsiders know that he rebelled from the vampire clan. None of them trusted him very much, and only a few senior officials knew that Tu Lan might have been unwilling to stay because of fear and awe at first, but now he really likes to practice secret martial arts, and for Jia Long's fear gradually turned into awe. After hunting down people he knew from the vampire clan before, he surrendered his name and completely integrated into the Holy Fist Palace. With Tu Lan taking action, Galen was still a little relieved, but Hoseman had absorbed Dam's introduction now, and he didn't know how far he had grown, and what if that external force appeared again. Okay, but let me know as soon as you get news of your whereabouts. Understood. Quinton Sidon was overjoyed and quickly resigned. Apparently he went to prepare for departure and collect intelligence resolutely. Galen narrowed his eyes slightly. Since that external force could accurately grasp the whereabouts of Hoseman and others, it must have a strong intelligence network, and it must also have a source of information for the mobilization of military forces in his Holy Fist Palace. Moreover, the strength of Tu Lan and the others may not necessarily be able to suppress Hoseman. It seems that I still have to do it myself. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 753. Boom. The top of a snowy mountain peak somewhere in Iceland. Large swaths of rocks and snow powder exploded, flying everywhere like bombs. Looking from a distance, a huge gap was directly blown out on the right side of the entire snow peak, like a bite of sugar cane. The upper half of the mountain suddenly slid down and crashed onto the bottom plateau, causing the ground to shake violently. The sky was clear without a single white cloud, but the light was still not very warm. The sun shines on the base of the snow peak explosion, and there is a dark cave there. A faint trace of green smoke emerged from the cave. The green smoke flew around the entrance of the cave in the air, and then quickly dispersed, as if it were a living thing. Cough, cough, cough. A slight cough came from the entrance of the cave, and it seemed to be the voice of an old man. After a while, an old man with white beard and hair slowly walked out of the cave. He was leaning on a thick white crutch and wearing a tattered animal skin suit, which seemed to be pieced together from many different animal skins. It is made up of a necklace with a string of shrunken human skulls hanging on the chest, giving people a primitive and ancient feeling. Finally out, the old man's face was covered with wrinkles like old tree bark, and his hair and beard were spread around his body like a lion, completely unkempt. He put his free hand into his mouth and blew hard. Shh. A sharp whistle suddenly sounded, drifting far away along the cold wind. I don't know how long it took, but a small black dot flew faintly in the sky in the distance. As the distance got closer, the black spot gradually revealed its full appearance. It was a large black eagle without a trace of color on its body, with a wingspan of more than 4 meters. Black Eagle's eyes reflected the strange old man at the entrance of the cave below, then with a clear whistle, he plunged down and flew towards the old man. As soon as the black shadow flashed, the old man, for some reason, sat on the back of the black eagle that had not completely flown down, and then one person and one eagle quickly flew towards the place where they came from. A few days later, news came out from the increasingly powerful Wugwang alliance that AG, one of the 3 leaders, finally left the country in the spring. And he successfully broke through to a new level. Originally, AG was the upper level. If he broke through again, it was obvious that the only possibility was the Death Apostle level. The Lightless Alliance originally only had the number 1 Holy Fist Palace with the strength of 2 Death Apostles, but now that there is one more Death Apostle, the entire alliance suddenly becomes more powerful, and it has completely formed a tyrannical force that can protest against the Blood Witch forces. Power. Witches, in particular, have now become the weakest link. No one knows whether the AG breakthrough represented by wizards represents the return of wizards who once disappeared from the stage of history. But the only consensus that everyone understands is that the power of the Lightless Alliance is getting bigger and bigger. The extraordinary power and the power of more and more ordinary humans are gathering. More and more humans are under the leadership of the Holy Fist Palace. Continuously practicing boxing skills, every moment and every second that passes will increase the power of the Wugwang Alliance in the Holy Fist Palace. In this situation, the vampires had to take action. Blood Alliance Deep Headquarters. In the blood-colored space underground cave, several huge spheres slowly floated in mid-air like glass balls, wandering and swaying slightly. All the dead apostles of the vampire clan, except for Bye-Bye, gathered here, each occupying a glass sphere. Wellington, the Red Moon, the female dead apostle, the mysterious blonde man, and one who turned out to be the Mother of Lions. It seems that the Mother of Lions is not here physically, but projects her own image through the ball, as if she is a virtual image standing in the ball. The 5 people opened their eyes in the ball one by one and exchanged glances with each other. The hidden child has already entered. Now we should act according to the plan. The Mother of the Lion was the first to speak out. The world has become increasingly chaotic. If we don't correct the situation, there may be unpredictable serious consequences. She spoke, still with a look of tenderness and compassion on her face. Through my recent observations, I feel that the original plan should be changed slightly. Someone made a different voice. It was the only female Death Apostle. She frowned slightly and stared at the Mother of Lions. I think that with Garen's character, even if he catches his parents and relatives and threatens him, I'm afraid it will be a dead end at most. It has no meaning other than letting him no longer have any worries. Why do you say that? We can use his relatives as bargaining chips in exchange for the benefits we need. Wellington is currently redeveloping new family descendants, which consumes a lot of money. Even now, his face is still blue, obviously due to excessive consumption of blood and essence. That's what I say, but according to my analysis of Garen's past temperament, this person appears to protect his family, but deep down he is still an absolutely cold and rational person. If his relatives threaten him, the effect will probably not be very good. Damn, it's not worth sacrificing the secret weapon we finally broke into, the female death apostle retorted. Indeed, Garen's personality is likely to directly fight to the death. Even if we kill his relatives, I am afraid it will only further activate his determination for revenge. By then, both sides will consume each other and lose more than they gain. In comparison, Saint the Boxing Palace is backed by a huge number of humans, and the speed of recovering its strength is far faster than ours. Such a confrontation is not worth it. Wellington also shook his head slightly. Speaking of which, Hangyu, isn't there someone among your descendants who has a good relationship with the Garen family? Is there any chance? He looked at Hangyu. I won't use such despicable means. Hangyu glanced at him indifferently, closed her eyes and stopped talking. Rigid, Wellington cursed in a low voice. I also agree with this point of view. Garen's personality is not the kind of person who is threatened. The biggest possibility is that the fish will be defeated, but it will eliminate his last trace of worries. The mysterious blonde man nodded. My suggestion is that Anza can temporarily don't make any moves to avoid exposing yourself, and you can have the greatest impact at the most critical moment. I agree. Wellington nodded. That's fine. The lion mother nodded and agreed to this method. Swish swish swish. Figures of people quickly passed through the tall grass. They were all dressed in black. In the dark night, they almost blended into the night, like fierce nighthawks. In front of the figure, a bloody figure was running quickly. The bloody figure was not slow, and he was getting closer and closer to the pursuers behind him. When the distance was less than 300 meters, the bloody figure suddenly stopped, turned from extremely fast to extremely quiet, and turned around suddenly. Under the moonlight, a cold and handsome face of a man suddenly appeared. It was Haseman, who had successfully escaped after killing Dam. You found me so quickly, Haseman murmured, looking at the several black figures behind him with an expressionless face. After killing Dam, he defected with a mask on, and must have become a wanted criminal of the Lightless Alliance. With the huge power network of the Holy Fist Palace and the various weird methods of the Dark Witches, even after he broke through, he would not know what happened. I felt like I was being traced. Hoseman. Die. Several black shadows rushed towards him and suddenly circled around him like black flowers, and 4 bright sword lights popped out. Stab his waist from all directions. Nighthawk. Haseman narrowed his eyes slightly and recognized that the secret weapon used by the opponent was Nighthawk's improved projection secret weapon. This secret weapon involves the most foreign objects in the Holy Fist Palace. It uses high speed to assassinate. For the purpose, for the sake of victory, they will do whatever it takes. These people who dare to come out to hunt are obviously desperados and fierce people. The blade must not be touched. It is 100% poisonous and will seal your throat at the sight of blood. Court death. With a stroke of his hands, Haseman suddenly threw out a series of transparent fist winds all around him, causing the 4 swords to bend violently. Bang! He put his foot in the belly of a black shadow and shot it away like a cannonball. He planned to leave one alive to question how much force the Holy Fist Palace had sent to hunt him down this time. But at this moment, he glanced at the masked eyes of the 4 people, and there was no desire to live in the eyes of the remaining 3. Not good. As soon as this realization appeared in his mind, he heard 3 extremely hot and terrifying breaths burst out. Boom! The 3 figures surrounding Haseman exploded into a ball of red and white fire, and the blazing flame snake suddenly swept Haseman inside. The fireball was more than 6 meters in diameter and had a weird color. Looking from a distance, it was divided into 3 layers of colors. The innermost was platinum, the middle was pure white, and the outermost was light red, as if it were composed of 3 rings of light. The huge shock turned into substantial ripples and spread. Looking from a distance, Hasaman and the three people could not be seen at all. They were all completely enveloped by the huge fireball. The surrounding grass quickly turned yellow, dried up, and scorched black, and then turned into paper ash. Sparks lit up on it, and then were violently blown away by the shock wave. Some of them directly stuck to the surrounding grass, quickly igniting fires. The fireball lasted for several seconds before slowly disappearing. What was left behind was a huge pit with a diameter of more than 10 meters, and smoke was still coming from inside. Bang! A black figure suddenly rushed out of the pit, with traces of afterimage flying into the darkness in the distance. Hasaman's body was hot, his clothes were almost completely burned, and large areas of his body were burned. His originally handsome face became unrecognizable, and most of his hair was burned off. This is the power of modern science combined with secret martial arts. The three dead soldiers blew themselves up together with powerful special explosives. The destructive power brought about even a death disciple like Horseman would have to suffer trauma if he was careless. After all, he doesn't have the terrifying physical fitness of Garen. But even so, the burnt skin on Hasaman's body was repairing rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. What a cruel method! Hasaman endured the pain and sped up to escape. Even if he was a death apostle, the Holy Fist Palace was not an ordinary force. There was also a real vampire death apostle Tulan, and he was dead. In addition to being so powerful that the apprentice has near immortal survivability, the actual gap in strength between the disciple and the upper level is not very big. If he is caught in a siege, and he is not a speed-type secret martial arts master, plus various high-tech means to delay interference, even he will inevitably be defeated. "Let's take it easy, Hasaman," a voice came from very far away. It seemed to be a high-level executive of Nighthawk. He couldn't remember clearly, but that was not important now. What matters is the sharp whistling sound that suddenly sounded overhead. Whoosh! A black shadow instantly passed over his head, and Hasaman suddenly felt a strong threat coming from above. He quickly looked up and saw two torpedo-like white missiles flying towards him with a scream. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 754. Boom. The missile exploded with a bang, splashing huge sound waves and air waves, and directly lifted Hasaman flying far away and rolled to the ground. Soon there was another sharp whistling sound, and several more missiles flew down from the sky like meteors. After a few chee-chee sounds, the second wave of missiles actually automatically decomposed into more than a dozen sub-warheads, and fired densely towards the position where Hasaman might dodge. Bang 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 bang. Amidst a series of endless explosions, Hasaman continued to dodge at high speed. A large number of sparks spattered by the missile explosion stuck to his body and kept burning, making it difficult to extinguish. This made him extremely embarrassed. He quickly took off his coat and used the help of the grass. Concealment constantly avoids the warhead coverage in the sky. Lock. Suddenly, a deep female roar came from afar. As soon as the roar ended, an invisible huge force suddenly fell on Hasaman, causing him to sink suddenly. Roar. Hasaman suddenly raised his arms, and the shadow behind him roared like a giant beast. Suddenly breaking free from the suppression of huge power, he narrowly avoided the third wave of missile bombardment. Holy Fist Palace Tactics Hall. Garen glanced at the sand table in front of him, his face expressionless, and he just listened calmly to the explanations of the professionals around him. On the white sand table, the overall shape of the entire Earth was completely shaped, directly forming a huge globe. Some key places on it are marked clearly with flashing red dots. Garen's eyes fell on the globe. The world here also called this planet Earth. In Asia and Europe, there are 3 small red dots flashing, which means that the forces of the Holy Fist Palace in these 2 areas are fighting and conflicting with the vampires. Other places in Asia, Africa, and the Americas are relatively calm. However, some places in Asia are slightly red as a whole, like an area that is about to be smeared with red oil, indicating that these places are also in conflict with the vampires, but on a larger scale. Much smaller. As for Asia, representatives from the red area requested support, but the attack was not severe. People from the headquarters have been sent over to guard the area. With the cooperation of local forces, there will be no problem in stabilizing the situation. The commentator from the intelligence department was a dashing beauty. Wearing a black military uniform skirt and flesh-colored stockings, she was quickly introducing the current situation to Garin with a solemn expression. According to the latest statistics from our intelligence department, the current focus is on the flashing red dots, especially in Europe, where the Blood Clan's power is deeply rooted. The active attack now is probably to cover up the purpose and attract our attention. The female officer whispered. What about the pursuit team? Garin asked in a deep voice. We have followed, but Hassan is very tenacious. We have dispatched 4 bombing formations and a division of special forces. We are fully cooperating with the combatants in the palace to encircle and suppress them. The Dark Witch has also provided support. Any other questions? No more. There are abundant forces everywhere. The only thing our Holy Fist Palace has to do is to make up for the shortcomings of their special forces. The vampires are only strong in special warfare. When facing the battlefield head-on, the forces in various places are not simple roles. After evading their speed and hypnosis, the so-called vampires are just thicker-skinned and longer-lived, the female officer said confidently. Who is the current commander of the Americas headquarters? Garin gently touched the United States area on the globe with his finger. It's Lieutenant General Strong of the U.S. Military Department, responsible for troop dispatch. Please be prepared, the vampires will definitely take action to help Hoseman, Garin said calmly. Are you saying that the vampires' big move is probably to cover up Hoseman, so that we have to allocate a large number of troops to defend against them? The female officer frowned. It's possible. Garin took one last look at the globe. The flashing red dots and red areas were still very eye-catching. Get the maneuver team ready to go. Yes. A week later. US Canada border. Hassan ran away frantically, with the roar of fighter bombers coming from time to time overhead. The troops previously dispatched by the Canadian military quickly retreated after several negotiations, and they were allowed to surround and pursue him through the border forest. In this week, Hoseman felt for the first time the feelings of the people he had hunted before, and also experienced Dam's personal experience before. Continuous army pursuit and bombardment, group after group, no matter where he escaped, he could be quickly located and found. The combination of satellite positioning and witchcraft gave him no place to hide and rest, and he could only move forward without interruption. Escape. When he was hungry, he would kill random wild animals and eat raw meat. When he was thirsty, he would spend most of his time drinking blood, without even having a chance to roast meat and make soup. If he hadn't been promoted to the perfect water bird fist and his body had undergone some strange and mysterious changes, he might not be able to hold on anymore. Keep on holding on, hold on. He hadn't rested or closed his eyes for a week, and he was constantly being chased like a frightened bird. Even Hassan was on the verge of exhaustion at this time. His eyelids suddenly rolled away a distance, and a red fireball exploded behind him, followed by an air-to-ground missile. It could also be weapons like anti-aircraft guns. Over the past few days, he has become accustomed to the continuous appearance of powerful weapons from the army. At this time, he was completely naked, his beard and hair were burned off, his skin was black, and there were burns everywhere, all of which were caused by these weapons. Give. Even though his physique was extremely special after his promotion, now, his recovery power has begun to weaken rapidly. But now that he had made the decision to rob and kill Dam, he had already anticipated the consequences. The most important thing, in fact, he always thought that it was not to kill Dam, but because of the appearance of that mysterious man, which made him seem to have snatched something from the teacher and escaped his control. This was the most fundamental reason for being hunted. Source. However, since he had decided to snatch the mask before, such an outcome was naturally something he was considering. He had arranged for absolutely loyal personnel to secretly contact the vampire clan, and now the vampire clan should have taken action. His legs moved quickly like a machine, making various instinctive evasive action routes. The cannon fire from the aircraft behind him kept passing over the ground, creating a series of mud fountains like water splashes. Haseman was unmoved and accelerated towards the front. At the end of the grass ahead, there was a large dense ancient jungle. It's dark, damp, and dimly lit, making it the perfect place to escape. As long as they entered the woods, the intensity of the pursuit would be reduced, and Haseman felt slightly relieved. But at this moment, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of the woods. Bang bang bang. A series of searchlights formed a dazzling beam of light, instantly enveloping Haseman in the middle, forming a huge square. The dazzling light made his eyes turn white for a moment, and he did not adapt quickly. Haseman, don't struggle anymore. The man in front of the woods has a hot figure. He is wearing a bright red silk cheongsam, revealing his slender and round legs in stockings. His shawl of red hair is hanging down, but his beautiful and white face is, a cold feeling. The combination of charm and cold temperament makes him feel inexplicably powerful and fierce. In particular, the pair of red almond-shaped eyes that look down slightly reflect the bright searchlight pole, reflecting a crystal-like beauty like crystal. Quentin Horseman stopped abruptly and stood in the center surrounded by searchlights. His face was haggard, and his original handsome temperament and face were completely unclear at this time. Even his voice was extremely hoarse, as if he hadn't drank water for a long time. You have never defeated me once, get out of my way, I don't want to kill you. There was a hint of sarcasm in Quentin's eyes. The person you are now is not the person you were in your heyday. Do you insist on fighting me? The only clean part of Haseman's eyes were his eyes. He stared closely at Quentin, and the whites of his eyes were densely covered with bloodshot eyes. It's not me, it's us. Quentin smiled slightly, and suddenly a figure walked out of the woods behind him. He was wearing a white Taoist uniform with the word sacred on the chest. It was clearly the standard martial arts uniform of the Holy Fist Palace. The person's hair was standing up high, his body was muscular, and his body was like a brown bear, but he walked silently, giving people a strange feeling of contradiction. Sidon Haseman recognized the opponent immediately. He was the first and strongest member of the fighting club at the same time as him. Sidon, one of the 4 great generals. Haseman, why did you betray us? Sidon asked coldly with a stern look on his face. Betrayal? This is not a betrayal. Haseman was still in the mood to laugh. I am not willing to be subordinate to others forever. My life is not to be someone else's subordinate. Stupid, Sidon shouted coldly, the teacher has delegated all his power to us, especially you and Marshal Dam. I didn't expect that you are still dissatisfied. Do you think you can replace the teacher's position? Why not? Haseman grinned and sneered, and he instantly disappeared into the area surrounded by searchlights, like a black line, silently rushing towards Quentin and Sidon directly in front. Boom! At this moment, a pillar of fire exploded from the ground in front of Quentin and Sidon, shooting straight into the sky and intercepting Horseman's advancing figure. Kill him, Quentin pulled Sidon back quickly. The dense woods behind him instantly lit up with large swathes of gunfire, and countless bullet storms surged towards Haseman. All these bullets have gone through special processes and use special heavy metal warheads. As long as they are penetrated into the body, they can cause heavy metal poisoning. Some bullets also have special explosion chambers, which can produce a secondary explosion after hitting the target, expanding the wound. For a time, large areas of grass in front of the woods were directly destroyed, and fires quickly broke out in some places. Hassan dodged left and right in the hail of bullets, but he didn't seem to be hit much. He jumped over several times and pounced on Quinton and Sidon like lightning. "I come." Sidon was unafraid, down to earth, and stepped forward. An extremely standard horse-stepping punch was blasted out boldly. Bang! Fists collided fiercely, and both Hoseman and Sidon were shocked. One flew backwards and rolled to the ground, while the other took several steps back, his face turning red. "Come again," Sidon roared, and rushed forward with a gust of wind, like a tiger descending from the mountain. At this time, the soldiers and gunmen lying in ambush around them naturally stopped and waited for the result of the close combat between the two. Sidon rushed out fiercely, punching out his fists from his waist. Each punch was like a cannonball, the violent explosive force was fully activated, and the muscles in his whole body were also slightly twisted, tightening like steel wires, making a sizzling sound. The strong fists hit Hassan one after another, and he caught him with equally strong palms. At this time, Hassan was at the end of his rope and could no longer muster the courage to suppress the opponent. He could only fight with Sidon with all his strength. But just like that, more and more hidden injuries inside his body were gradually triggered.